Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel.
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
We are continuing on a little bit of a binge with covering shark movies. So
Yes,
we last spoke about the all-time classic Jaws,
obviously.
and we are continuing forward with another memorable shark movie here. It was directed by Rennie Harlan,
Yes.
excuse me. It was released July 28th of 1999, and today we are talking about Deep Blue Sea.
Deepest, bluest, my head is like a shark's fin. Okay.
Yes.
The
Yes.
I am so excited. You already know this is one of my favorite shark movies. It's one of my favorite B monster movies, if you will. One of my favorite sci-fi movies. I absolutely adore Deep Blue Sea. And I was telling you off the air, but there's nostalgia attached to it. For those who don't know, this movie came out in 1999, so I was roughly around 13 years old. I just turned 13. So me and my cousin went to go see this movie, but we weren't old enough to walk into the theaters without a parent, a guardian, or any adult whatsoever. And my mom went with us. And my mom was searching for a couple that could just walk us in. And my mom walked up to this couple, really nice young couple, and said, "Hey, I'm their mom. I have their tickets. I am giving them permission to see this R-rated film, but I don't want to see it. I'm going to go shopping at the mall. Would you guys be okay just escorting them in as if they're with you?" And this young couple was like, "You got it." And I wish I remember their names, but wherever they are, I thank them so much because to this day, it's one of my favorite movie going experiences. And they grabbed the tickets, they walked us in with them, and they said, "Enjoy the show." And we went and got our own seats. And man, it is. What a fun ride it was.
I remember a lot of hype surrounding this movie. It ended up being like a sleeper blockbuster hit for that summer.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, Jaws 1975. There had been many other shark movies made since Jaws, but there was a little bit of hype surrounding Deep Blue Sea. LL Cool J had a
Yes,
role
had a
in it.
lot to do with it with
You
the
know,
with the with the young community and fans like myself. We were like, LL Cool J's in this movie.
right. And we're gonna age ourselves here, but TRL was still on the air, and
Yup.
Deepest Bluest, the song in parentheses Shark's Fin it
Mm-hmm.
made the top 10, so that kind of
Yup.
fueled it as well. And uh, the song is almost as iconic as the movie.
Listen. You want to talk about aging yourself? Okay, so I had the song, but I did not have the CD, nor did I have the cassette. But what I did is I had a blank cassette always on
Mm.
in my radio, and when it came on once, I was able to hit record really fast, and that's how I would listen to that song. And I recorded it on a blank cassette on my radio, and I would listen to it. I would have my radio on my pool deck, and I'd be swimming to Deepest Bluest. My head is like a shark's fin. That was the cultural impact that song had on me as a kid.
As we speak about the movie, we'll talk about the cast as well, because a lot of these actors went on to do other things that are quite
Mm-hmm.
memorable. So let's get started.
Yes.
So we are in a remote underwater facility. We have doctors Susan McAllister and Jim Whitlock. They're conducting research on mako sharks to help in the reactivation of dormant human brain cells, like the ones found with people with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
After one of the sharks escapes the facility and attempts to attack a boat full of young adults, financial backers send corporate executive Russell Franklin to investigate the facility. And this opening scene here, you think the shark's going to get them,
Oh, you
and
do.
it's right out of a Jaws movie. You see
Yes.
with the young people and everything, they're partying. Radio falls in the water, but just at the last second when the shark's about to get them, Thomas Jane, the hero, almost like a superhero, comes in
Yes.
and saves them.
This is when I developed my man crush on Thomas Jane. I didn't know who this guy was, but immediately I was like, "Oh, he's the superhero of this movie. He's the hero." And the opening sequence is so good, and I have to give a shout out because it's one of my favorite scores from a film. It opens up with the film logo, and you hear the song creeping in, and it's very eerie. And not many shark movies have been able to capture that eeriness in a score like Jaws. Jaws is the GOAT. No one's been able to capture it. But this is the other shark movie that when I think of amazing scores, I think of Deep Blue Sea. It's just very haunting and eerie, and we're building up this suspense. And like you said, we got these young kids partying on a boat, and they're corny, right? Like you have the girls like, "Did you feel that?" And he's like, "Oh, I felt something, baby." You know what I mean? Like it's very cheesy, and then great use of a practical effect shark because this thing comes crashing through the boat, and it looks horrifying. And you really think someone's gonna go. I was like, "Oh, all these kids are dead," and they don't. Tom Jane's character comes out, takes what isn't take it out, but he's able to hold it back with a grappling weapon of sorts and keep it from killing the kids. And it was like at the time I was like, "Oh, we're not gonna have a cold open with a bloody massacre or something crazy like Jaws," and they didn't do that. And as we continue, I think there was a reason for it. I think it was kind of like "Oh, you think this is the big baddie? Like you think this particular shark is the big baddie? Oh, no, 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 no. We got something else for you." And I think it was their way of kind of like making us go, oh, okay. Well, where's the threat? And then we get it later.
It's a great introduction to Carter and how fearless he is, and we'll see him display that character trait as the movie goes along. So Susan and Jim prove their research is working by testing a certain protein complex that was removed from the brain tissue of their largest shark. As everyone's celebrating, this shark, who we think is sedated, wakes up and bites Jim's right arm off as soon as it wakes up.
This scene, and it's a practical effect. Again, practical effects hold up really, really, really well. So you have him sitting next to the shark, and he's kind of like, he's smoking a cigarette, and he's like, "Look what we were able to accomplish." And I remember this thing in the theaters to this day, just the sound and how loud it was, and it just turns over and rips this guy's arm off, and all of a sudden we're in a completely different movie, right? Like it's roughly like, again, once you get like 20 minutes into this movie, it just doesn't slow down. We've got some character development. We're building up with who Carter is and who Susan is and who Russell is. And Russell's kind of, you can see that he's ruffling some feathers at the facility because they know that he could potentially shut all of this down. Like there's all this tension, and then all of a sudden there's this eureka, like we did it, like we've been able to do something, and all that tension is gone. Everyone's like, "Wow, congratulations, doctor, we did it, we're this," and everybody's happy. And all of a sudden, within a fraction of a second, it's all taken away. Dude get this arm ripped off, and it's like, oh, off to the races.
And leading up to this moment, we'd seen a couple things, like the sharks were synchronized in the water.
Yeah,
with one of the divers, they were destroying the cameras and such. So we were getting hints that, oh no, this isn't going the way that we think it's going to go, but
yeah,
but they managed to subdue the shark and, try to extract the protein and such.
Again, showing Carter just being that guy. Like
Right.
he goes down there, and one of the craziest things was, even Russell picks up on it, is that the sharks recognize the weapon. Like Carter holds the weapon up in order to get ready to take out one of the sharks, or harpoon it, if you will. And the shark kind of backs up, and they're like, "Wait," they recognize the gun. So like you said, up to this point, they've been giving us little glimpses of things. One, the shark swimming backwards, which they're like, "Excuse me,"
Right.
and recognizing the gun, they're like, "Whoa." Also, the other sharks happened to kill the first tiger shark that escaped the facility. And again, that's why I was like, they kind of held that back. Like, "Oh, you thought this was your big baddie. No, 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 this is not your big baddie. These three are your baddies over here." And they tore the shark up. So there's been a lot of like building and building up, just showing how intelligent these sharks have gotten. Us as a fan don't realize why just yet. And that conversation will happen soon after this event takes place.
So after the shark bites off Jim's arm, Carter holds up a gun, presumably to kill the shark, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And because it's going crazy, and it's like, well, what else is going to happen? We need to put the shark down. And Dr. Susan releases the shark, presumably to save the shark's life, because she's thinking more about the research.
Mm-hmm.
She goes on to say he's her best friend later on in the movie, but okay, he's your best friend, but you're not thinking about anybody else in the room. Like,
Yeah.
your quote unquote best friend just got his arm chomped off. This shark might go a little more wild here, but you're saving it. And it was almost like a foreshadowing of what was to come later by her releasing the
Yeah,
shark. So
this was the moment, and I could feel it. And again, it's that nostalgia, and it's those core memories. I remember people being very angry when she hit that button,
right.
because again, you just saw how aggressive and vicious this thing was while subdued. This thing was supposed to be out, and it was awake. And not only was it awake, it was able, even though it was being held down, to get enough room to potentially take someone out. And Carter was like, we can't have that. I got to put the shark down. And she just says, Carter, no. And she hits the button.
Right.
And Carter looks at her and goes, are you crazy? And she just doesn't say it. And I remember everyone around us just being like, oh, what is she doing? Like, from that moment on, I don't think anybody likes Susan for the rest of the movie.
So then we have Brenda Kearns, the tower's operator. She calls a helicopter that comes down through the rain and the winds to evacuate Jim because, they managed to tie the tourniquet. Well, we couldn't save the arm, but we can save his life. Jim is being lifted. As he's being lifted, unfortunately, the cables jam and they drop him back into the shark pen. And the largest shark grabs the stretcher and pulls the helicopter into the tower, killing Brenda and the pilots, as well as causing massive explosions that damage the facility. In this one scene, we go from 1 to 10.
It's so fast.
It was already at a heightened level because, well, it was a progression. Jim gets his arm bit off. The shark gets released. Okay, we can still maintain some order here. Let's get this guy to safety. He's being lifted up, and nope. Everything just gets destroyed.
Director Rennie Harlan is no stranger to action sequences, and he went very hard in this scene. Obviously, and to make matters worse, there's a huge storm happening outdoors. So even just getting Jim to get help is a challenge in itself. They're getting knocked over by waves left and right. They're getting tossed around like rag dolls, and they're trying to pull this guy up, and it's so sad. And the score plays a huge role too, because when he's falling, there's this like sadness. You're like, oh my God, oh no. And the pilots are trying to hang on. Brenda dies in the explosion. The helicopter pilot dies in explosion. The other helicopter guy dies in the explosion. Like, we just lost 3 people in one swoop in less than like 10 seconds. And you're like, oh, well, Jim's gone. And then all of a sudden, like you said, it's just getting dragged under the water. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. So back in the lab, Susan, Franklin, and we have Carter Blake. They're in there. And then we have marine biologist Janice Higgins and an engineer, Tom Scoggins. They witnessed the shark, who has now grabbed the stretcher with Jim still attached to it, ram the main window there. Because the shark is smart enough to use that as a ramming device to crack it. It shatters, it drowns Jim, and then it floods the entire facility. So we're just continuing forward, just building the action and the terror, so to speak, of what's happening here. Poor Jim. I mean,
Jim
Stellan Skarsgård went through it, man. Like,
he did, bro.
Arm bit off, and then he's getting raised up, and then he falls in the water, and then you think, oh, he's done for sure. No, he's still alive. And they grab him, and
it's almost like, I wonder if, and I don't know if this was intentional, but he has a line in the film where Russell mentions when he sees the shark and everything that it is, he goes, what in God's creation? And Jim says, oh, not his, ours. And it's almost like this arrogance of like, yes, this is what we created. Like, this beast, everything about what it is and what it's become is our creation. And it almost reminds me of like a Frankenstein situation where now he's taken out by the Frankenstein monster itself, which is the shark that they've been experimenting on. Um, and it was like, maybe I was like, I wonder if that was why they made it so brutal. It was like you had this arrogance to you. You were playing God essentially. And it showed you how quickly things can go wrong and turn against you. Because, like you said, he had a rough man. He lost an arm. He had to deal with the hope spot, thinking he was going to get out, fall into the water, being dragged, thrown into this glass window that is extremely thick. So that did not feel good. And then knowing he's going to have a slow and painful death if he drowns. That was rough.
Yeah. So the group, they go to the facility's wet entry, where they plan to take a submersible escape.
Mm-hmm.
Susan confesses to the others that she and Jim genetically engineered the sharks to increase their brain size. And because they were not large enough to harvest the protein, they broke protocol and made the sharks smarter and more deadly by doing this. In the facility's kitchen, we get introduced to Sherman Preacher Dudley. The kitchen's flooded. He has this parrot, and unfortunately, the parrot gets eaten by a shark.
Of course it does.
Yes, but he gets back at it by
he does
setting off an explosion with his lighter because the gas floods the kitchen.
This scene, first of all, the conversation scene was really, really, really good, because when she admits that her and Jim had broken protocol, it was a reminder, or not a reminder because we hadn't known up to that point, but it was the realization that no one else was aware. Like, all their lives were put in danger and they weren't aware. Carter was constantly swimming with these beasts and was not aware that they had become smarter, which would make them more deadly, and being able to move in different ways and plan and function differently. And it's like she risked all of their lives with this, her and Jim. And it's a great realization for us, the fans, and us, the characters, that they're not on the same page. The same way the fans, we are kind of like, oh, like we're against Susan at this point. The rest of the crew is as well. Like, they're not siding with her. Like they're calling her names. They're like, you did this. You threw us to the bottom of the food chain. It's a great scene. And then, like you said, we get to meet Preach, who is our chef, and the irony of him having to escape from a shark into an oven. I promise you, with every fiber of my being, I thought he was dying in this scene. I absolutely thought he was dying. I said, oh, well, there it is. We had LL Cool J. He got a nice little cameo. This is going to be it. And he gets into the oven to escape the shark in the flooded kitchen. And he even points it out. Like, he talks to God a few times in this movie, right? Like, he uses his faith a lot, which is it's so fun to watch this in the movie, where everyone's just trying to stay alive, and Preach every once in a while will just use his faith to keep him pushing forward. And he's in there and he goes, God, I understand the irony of being a chef and being cooked in his own oven, but I've got other plans. And he's fighting and he's using the axe. And again, great practical effect, because this whole sequence of using the shark was a practical effect, and it's busting through the stove, and he's able to get on top of the oven because there's multiple layers. So he breaks through the floor, he's coughing on the gas, and he dives out just as the shark busts in through the bottom. He leaps out, and the shark also, with its snout or nose, turns it on. And Preach gets one of the coolest kills in the movie, because there's this bravado to it. Like, he's like, yeah, I got you. And he goes to the end and he takes the lighter and he just says, you ate my bird. And he just flings it, and the shark comes out of the water, hits the fire and the gas, and just explodes. And we get that cool dive into the water from Preach. And I was sitting in the theaters like, well done. There was applause. I remember people cheering. One, because it's LL Cool J, and everyone was like, yeah, like we were like, LL killed the shark. Like, he killed one of the shark. We got two left, but LL killed one. Amazing sequence. I absolutely love it.
So for those of you following along, we've just been using mostly character names, but there's a lot of recognizable faces up until this point, and I do want to give them a shout out here. So Carter's being played by Thomas Jane.
Yes.
We have LL Cool J as Preacher, so we recognize him. We've already seen Brenda, the radio operator. That's Ada Turturro.
Oh yeah,
you know her as Tony Soprano's sister from The
Sopranos, baby.
Franklin is played by the great Samuel L. Jackson,
bro.
And
Sam Jackson, look, Sam Jackson is that dude. So like he was another selling point. I knew LL Cool J and I recognized Samuel L. Jackson, and I was like, we got to go see it.
Yeah, and then for the heck of it, we ended up getting Michael Rappaport
Yeah,
as
love
Tom
Rappaport.
Scoggins, and then those of you that know the Skarsgård brothers, we have Stellan
Mm-hmm.
Skarsgård, their father, talking about Alexander Skarsgård and Bill Skarsgård, their father as Jim Whitlock. So a lot of recognizable faces here.
Oh yeah.
Alrighty, so let's regroup here. So the group reaches the wet entry, and they discover that the submersible has been damaged.
Mm-hmm.
While delivering a passionate monologue about how they're going to get out of here and how they're going to make it, he's emphasizing the need for unity. Franklin is dragged into the submersible pool by a shark and devoured. This was a jump scare, and nobody saw it coming. Also, Samuel L. Jackson, I want to say at the time, might have been the biggest star in the movie. If I'm
Yes,
not, if I'm,
100%.
yeah, if I'm not,
I would say that.
yeah, and it's just kind of like, he's saying, first we're going to seal off this pool and then we're going to get out of here. And, and then he just gets grabbed and dragged under. So now all bets are off because the biggest star in the movie just got killed.
It was really exciting because we were in an era where movies, I remember when Scream did it with Drew Barrymore, it was a big risk, and movies started to get a little brave. Movies were like, well, maybe we can attach a big name and we can kill them. And then there was a period where it stopped and it started up, and you're like, oh, I love when movies are able to do that. So we all knew Sam Jackson. As far as the actors go, I agree. I think he was the biggest name attached to the film. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Sam Jackson is definitely surviving because it's Sam Jackson. I didn't know Tom Jane prior. I didn't know many people in this cast prior, except Sam Jackson, LL Cool J. So they were my two, and I was like, we're gonna lose LL, but we're gonna get Sam. And this sequence is so great because the story with Russell is that he had also been in a life and death scenario where multiple people were involved and people lost their lives, where they got caught in a blizzard, in an avalanche. I forget where exactly, but they got caught in an avalanche. And he talks about how they promised that they would say that it was the snow that killed some of the other people, and they made a promise, but the reality was that wasn't the case because people started to turn against one another. And he's using that information to kind of motivate them. He's like, I've been through that. He goes, you think this is bad? Try ice. Ice moves like it has a mind of its own, that it got a taste for it and wanted to keep going. And he's like, so we can do this. And he's mustering them up. And it's a great shot. Like we get our slow pan towards Sam Jackson, and we're also getting a view of our other characters, and Tom Jane's character Carter is close up front. And the score is kind of like an uplifting score, like they're motivating us, and it was a great choice. And when I tell you that shark jumps out of the tank, because again, the way they're positioned, the shark has to jump out, land on whatever material that is, and pull him in, and it's done so well. It's a great jump scare, and then the score changes, it gets very eerie, and the movie just showed us that anybody's expendable. Like anybody can go, and we needed that. And in my opinion, it's one of the greatest death sequences in a movie, just for the surprise factor in itself, just because none of us saw it come. We're gonna seal off this tunnel, bam, and the frame is just his head. Like they got a nice tight close-up shot, so when it comes out of nowhere. And I wish that if people haven't seen this in a theater, I hope there's a way they can, because just seeing that in the theater was mind blowing. Like I remember me and my cousin like just both jumped and people screamed, and the same way the characters felt, because they're selling it, man. Like Tom Jane and everybody, Michael Rappaport especially, like they're selling it, like they're just in complete shock. And Michael kind of goes into the fetal position. That's how I felt, because I'm like, this is Sam Jackson. They just did that to him. But it was a reminder that they took someone in the movie, a character who was confident, who was a survivor, who had been in this type of a scenario before, and he came out on top. That if a guy like that can go, anybody can go. And it was brilliantly executed.
So the remaining crew Oh, and by the way, I think both sharks got to him, and then they
Oh yeah,
they they tore him
Boop.
apart. Yeah, yeah,
Rip him in half.
both sharks. So the remaining crew, they decide to climb up the elevator shaft at the risk of destabilizing the pool. As they climb, we end up getting some explosive tremors that cause the ladder to break, and now Janice loses her grip and falls into the water. She's the one that was in the relationship with Jim. So
Yes.
she's already upset as it is with with everything that's happening. And despite Carter's attempt to save her, the shark drags Janice under and eats her. She falls in the water, and it's heartbreaking because she says, "I don't want to die."
Yeah, it's really sad.
And you just see her go under, and everyone's like, "Ugh," we're thinking that's the end of it. But the shark decides to make, in a ridiculous action movie sequence, he makes an appearance by jumping back out of the water again with her still, attached, like inside of her mouth, and she's still screaming. And it's almost like an last ditch effort. Carter's like, I can save her. I can save her. He's trying to grab her, and nope. Shark goes right back
It
under. She's gone.
it makes it so much harder for Carter, because like you said, it's like another opportunity to save her. Like she is sitting, she gets pulled down, and you're kind of just like, all right, that's it. Like it got her. And Rennie Harlan, director, was like, no, we gotta spice it up. They really want to go crazy with the kills, and they come flying out of the water. And it's like the image of it is so haunting because she's
Right.
literally sitting in the mouth of a shark, and there's blood coming everywhere, and she's reaching and screaming, and he's trying so hard to get a grip of her, and he loses her again. And when she goes into the water, it holds on Carter, and his hand is just stuck extended, like he's just absolutely in shock. And I was like, I would go into shock at that point, because I don't know how you function after that. Seeing someone that he has worked with hours and hours, these people all became friends, maybe family in a sense, and he just saw this happen. And the shark was very cruel in a way, where it was like, oh, I'm gonna give you a hope spot. Here comes a falsie for all the wrestling fans, and just prigs it and just takes her away. And it was that was a brutal one.
Yeah. So the rest of the group, they move on, and they meet up with Preacher eventually. Carter and Scoggins go to the flooded lab to activate a control panel that drains a stairway to the surface, while Susan heads to her room to collect her research material. Carter and Scoggins reach the control panel, but the largest shark storms in, ripping Scoggins apart and wrecking the controls. This was rough because Scoggins was probably the most outwardly scared person out of
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
And he was like, I'm not going out there. They're out there. They're going to get me. And Carter's like, I'll go with you. You won't be alone. I'll take care of you. We got this. It's either that or it's either we stay in here and die, or we at least try to get out of here. We might die, but at least we'll try getting out of here first, you know?
yeah, yeah. He was absolutely the most horrified. Every time they got put in a situation, he was the one that panicked the most. And because of that, to a degree, he was also able to come up with different ideas. Like they were going to go with the sub, they couldn't do that. They were going to swim. He's like, nope, we got a ladder here, it goes up, but then the ladder broke. He's like, oh, we can do this, we can do it. So he's constantly trying to figure out another way to get them out. And he does have pretty decent ideas, but he's terrified, absolutely terrified. And this sequence was pretty rough for the both of them, because they find Jim's body floating after them being drowned, and you see them scared, and they're screaming and they're panicking, and they're like, hey, look at me, like we're gonna do this, right? We're gonna do this together, right? Because you're gonna trust me, right? That's right, that's you're gonna trust, we're gonna do this. And they go down there, and it's so again, it's another hope spot, and it's so sad because they're able to get everything the way they need it to be. They turn everything on, and he gives him the thumbs up. Like he's like, yo, we did it. And he does the hanger, like, yo, we got it. We did it. And you just see Carter's face just go completely white underwater, and he panic. And it's like he already knows. And he just turns around in an amazing visual practical stunt. Yeah, just like this thing swoops in and hooks him from the side and takes him against the machinery, destroys machinery, and just like a cheese grater, man, just grating him into pieces. And it's so sad. And he's cut in half, and you see his leg continue to twitch.
Yeah.
And Carter is just making a break for it. And the only thing he can do now is just open the door and get out. And we get a little tease here, and we'll learn why later. But there is a perfect opportunity for this shark to take out Carter, and it doesn't do it. And we'll discuss why later. But it just kind of swims by, and it goes right next to Carter. And Carter's like, all right, go faster, must go faster, must go faster. He opens the door and gets out. But, we lost one of the good ones in this scene.
So back in her room, Susan encounters another shark, and she ends up electrocuting it with a power cable, destroying her research in the process because she went back to get her research, and she drops it in, and then it's like, and she can't reach to get it because the shark's going to get her. And then now it's like, well, it's either my life or the shark's. She chose her own life. It's a pretty cool scene.
It is. It's a great scene, and she's so eager to get that context, that material. And she's like, if we don't get it, then all these deaths were useless. And Preach yells at her. He goes, all deaths are useless, doctor. But she's so adamant about getting it, but she ends up losing it, like you said, because she's either going to die, and that's it anyway, or she's gonna have to take out the shark, which she obviously didn't want to do. And she does a really cool thing. She takes off the wetsuit.
Right. We get the gratuitous shot, obviously.
Yes, it's a very, very, very gratuitous shot, because I remember watching it. Remember, I'm a 13-year-old boy at this time.
Right.
So I'm watching it in the theaters, and I'm like, oh. I wasn't a fan of Susan, but she's kind of coming around, as a 13-year-old boy. And she's got the white James Bond bathing suit underneath, and she steps on it so that way she can have some sort of a non-conductor. And almost like a throwback to the later Jaws movies where it gets electrocuted. She just rips this panel off the wall, and she's waiting for it, and it comes close. She just throws it in the mouth and just fries this thing, man. But in the process, unfortunately, fries the information that she needed.
So after regrouping, Carter, Susan, and Preacher, they go to a decompression chamber and they swim to the surface. And Carter leads them in a prayer. they all join hands.
Preach does, right?
Carter, excuse me. Preacher,
okay, yeah, Preach. Yeah.
They hold hands, and he starts reciting Psalm 23. But then he adds his own words to it. He adds some profanity in there.
Yes, he drops the F-bomb, and he goes, a big effing stick, Lord.
Yes.
And he's saying this.
Like, can I get an amen? And amen.
Like,
can I get an amen?
This scene was so great, because I remember as a kid, like he's praying, and I was like, all right, man, like they're coming together. They're all holding hands, and they're praying right now. And then he starts cursing, and I was like, can you do that?
Right.
Can you drop F-bombs when you praying? I was like, can you do that? And it was so interesting. And they're all like, he uses amen, 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 because they got to flood it, because they're about to open this hatch, and that pressure will pop them like a balloon. So they have to fill with water. And it's like, hey, listen, the Carter's like, listen, we're going to swim to the top. Sharks are naturally attracted to, shaking in the water, bubbles, and bright colors. So like, yo, we got these fire hydrants and life jackets. We're going to have to use these. If you use a life jacket and you go up to the surface too fast, your lungs are going to pop. So I do like that they brought that into it, for people who've seen like 47 meters down and things, you can't come up too fast. So like, can't do that. So it's like, okay. So I like that they all had like their own little fire extinguisher, and they would get out, and then they would turn it off and just let it run and see how it worked.
Yeah, so they used oxygen tanks to bait the last shark as it's attacking. Upon reaching the surface, Preacher is grabbed by the shark, suffering injuries to his leg, but he's released. So we think that he's not going to make it. He is released when he removes the crucifix from his neck and stabs the shark right in the eye. It takes a few tries, but he gets the shark in the eye, and almost a divine intervention, he gets saved.
Yes. This was, again, I remember in the movies, everyone was thinking, like, everyone kind of took like a breath of relief when they all reached the surface. And it was and then all of a sudden, Preach starts to scream, and you start to see him get pulled. And I remember being so upset, because obviously, again, LL Cool J, at 13 years old, was listening to LL Cool J music and hip hop and rap and R&B and all that, and being like, no, we're rooting for LL. We lost Sam. Like, we got to root for LL Cool J here. And when he got bit, I remember me and my cousin were like, no. And they're keeping on him. And I'm like, wait a minute, is he going to have a shot? and he takes the crucifix off, like you said, and he's fist fighting a shark. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
Like
ridiculous.
he's going and he gets it in the eye and he drags it, and like the shark obviously doesn't like that, and the shark kind of just spits him out, and you see him let him go, and I remember going, oh, thank God. Like I was like, we cannot lose we can't lose Preach. We cannot lose Preach. He's one of my favorite characters in the movie. We can't lose him. And Carter gets a hold of him and luckily brings him above the sea level on, I guess, what's left of that facility, because that place is sinking.
Yeah. So Carter realizes that the sharks have been using them to flood the facility so they can ram their way through the fences to the surface. They want to escape. It was never about attacking them, it was about getting free.
Yep.
So to keep the shark from escaping to the open sea, Susan deliberately cuts her hand and dives in the water in a heroic move here. She manages to distract the shark with her blood, but she is unable to get out of the water in time and she is devoured despite Carter's efforts to save her. So we're thinking, once again, we think she's going to make it because she made it to the surface. And while she had some type of redemption in the sense that, okay, by kind of killing the one shark, kind of make up for her mistake of letting one of the other sharks go free. I was wrong. She's admitting she was wrong, everything. But, in a bit of comeuppance here, the only true redemption is your own life. If other lives have been lost, the only way to redeem yourself is you give up your own life too.
Here's why this scene is so awesome. She jumps in the water and the shark stops.
Yeah.
It pauses. And I remember hearing the whispers, including my own, going, that's the shark that she let go. It paused, and they do this really cool thing with the shark in the movie where whenever it opens and closes its lids depending on a situation. So when it's trying to escape through the fences, the lids are down. When she jumps in the water, and her blood, it gets smaller blood, the lids lift, and then you get the black eyes.
Yeah.
And it starts swimming to her. And when it gets close enough and it recognizes her, the lids go down. And it's almost like that predatory nature drops for just a second. And I was like, oh man, it recognizes her because they're very intelligent. And I was like, it's not going to kill her. And I remember going, oh my God. But then Carter jumped in the water, and then all of a sudden those instincts kicked back in. It said, no, take her out. And it took her out. And it was this weird feeling because up to this point, it did feel like they were attempting the redemption. Like, this is the redemption. I was like, oh, she's going to survive somehow. Nope. Ate her in half. And then after the shark cuts her in half, eats her bottom half, then the top half. And then the shark just looks at Carter like, hey, buddy, I did that for you. And guess what? You're next. Like,
right.
it's like, he's like, I'm coming for you, man.
So while Carter is holding the shark's dorsal fin, because he ends up grabbing it in the process of the situation, he gets Preacher to shoot the shark with a harpoon. But unfortunately, the harpoon also pierces Carter's thigh.
So weird.
It injures him. Carter orders Preacher to connect the trailing wire to a battery, sending an electric current to an explosive charge in the harpoon, killing the shark. So we see the currents go all the way to the shark. Carter actually manages to jump off of the shark as the shark's swimming, but the shark hits the open water, but it can't travel fast enough to escape the current.
Nope.
The current gets to the shark and the harpoon, and we get this miraculous explosion. It erupts in a mushroom cloud of
It's
blood
so beautiful.
and water. And Carter escapes, and Preacher lives as well.
Such a good joke. Carter says, 45-foot shark, and you hit me. Nice. And right. Preacher's like, it's worse. I couldn't let him eat you, but you know what I mean? And like, this sequence was so cool because you don't forget about Preach, because Preach was just brought on to the facility to rest from his wounds. But when Susan gets eaten and Carter is alone with the shark, you're kind of like, I don't know what they're going to do at this point. You know what I mean? Like, what are we going to do? And the score lifts and you see Preach kind of crawling a little bit and he's coming up with the harpoon gun. And you're like, oh, Preach, Yeah, and like you're rooting, you're like, Preach, let's go. And he doesn't really know what the plan is, but he's like, okay, I'm gonna, and Carter's like, shoot it, and he shoots it, hits the dorsal fin, hits Carter. He is pinned to this shark. And I remember I was scared at this point, thinking, oh crap, even Carter's gonna die. This is gonna be one of those movies where we only have one survivor. And as much as I want to see LL Cool J live, I didn't want to lose Carter at this point. And they do this really cool thing because he is pinned to that shark bad. It goes right through his thigh, thigh, quadricep, like it's deep. And when the shark busts through the fence, Carter grabs the fence and it just rips his leg. Like his leg doesn't come off, but it just rips it from his leg. And the way they shot it was so awesome from a technical standpoint because it's an overhead view shot. So as you see the shark going through, you see Carter, who's doing some amazing pain acting. He grabs it and he looks directly at the camera and he just lets out this guttural scream under the water. And you just see all the air bubbles escaping and you can just feel that pain. And I remember going like, like just that, like I felt that, you know what I mean? And, but it worked. Preach blew it. Amazing explosion. Yeah. I loved it in the ocean, the blood, the this, that, just amazing explosion. And then those two are just waiting right there. Carter still got his feet in the water and Preach is like, hey, Carter, let me ask you something. You sure it was just 3 sharks? And Carter's like, yeah. And then Carter takes his feet out of the water. He goes, that's more like it. Because I'm telling you right now, man, if this was us, if we were in this type of situation, I'm not touching the water.
That's right.
I don't care. I don't care if we think we got all the sharks. No. I'm not touching the water. A leg, a foot, a toe, nada. So like the fact that like Carter had to be reminded for a little bit, like, yo, man, are you really sure? And he's like, okay. And they take their feet out, and it's not necessarily funny, but then you see a ship coming, and it's the next shift of people. They have no idea what has happened over the last 24 hours. And I'm like, can you imagine what it would be like? You're going in for your shift and you go and the entire facility is just underwater and there's 2 people and you're like, what happened? And they've got to explain this story. That is going to be a Netflix documentary at that point.
So that's our movie. And just some initial thoughts after this rewatch here. The words guilty pleasure come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is it a guilty pleasure if you don't feel guilty enjoying it?
I don't feel guilty at all, man. Like I have told people it is one of my favorites, but I know many people don't like it as much as I do, and they don't hate it, but they're like, it's a fun. Like I adore this movie. I think because when you watch a movie like Jaws that we had discussed, it's kind of hard for any shark movie to have any impact. It's hard. Like you've got to come up with something different and unique. And there are other great shark movies out there, but this came out in 1999. So for me, all I knew was Jaws up at this point. You know what I mean? Like that was it. Like that was the masterpiece. That was the GOAT, and it still is. But I wasn't really familiar with a lot of other shark movies at that age. So we went from Jaws, which is a masterpiece, and it's about tension and a slow build. And now we've got this sci-fi thrill ride roller coaster that's just adrenaline with sharks that are intelligent and manipulating people and creative and inventive kills that I walked away going, this is one of my favorite shark movies ever. And it's 2023, and I still feel the same.
Yeah, just a really high budget B movie, basically, with a great cast. And we already talked about it, just the iconic song Deepest Bluest. It's my hat, actually. My hat
is like a shark.
My shark thing, it's and it plays as the credits are rolling here.
Mm-hmm.
It was a box office success. It was made for reportedly between 60 and 82 million. Mm-hmm. And they ended up making 165 million total worldwide. So they made out well here. It would go on to be, it would be safe to say a cult classic at this point.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope I'm not the only one in that club because man, it's so fun.
Yeah. Let's give a little love to the cast here. Of course, we have Thomas Jane, aka the Punisher, as Carter Blake. We have Saffron Burrows as Dr. Susan McAllister. We have the one and only LL Cool J as Sherman Preacher Dudley. We have Jacqueline McKenzie as Janice Jan Higgins, Michael Rappaport as Tom Scoggins, Stellan Skarsgård as Dr. Jim Whitlock, Ada Turturro as Brenda Kearns, and of course Samuel L. Jackson as Russell Franklin. So a lot of actors that you may or may not know, depending on what things you watched here. I would say, all right. So obviously, Carter's the standout. He's the hero of the
I
movie.
love Carter in this movie.
But I want to give some love to Samuel L. Jackson as well, because
Bro, when he was in it, he killed it.
Up until the moment that he left, he was taking charge,
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty cool, but everyone did well in their roles. And obviously the scene stealer is LL Cool J as Preacher,
Yeah. And the funny thing about Preacher's character is majority of the movie, he's alone. Like, he does not meet up with the group until a good portion of them are gone. You know what I mean? Like, he meets them halfway through the movie. So a lot of the scenes that he's in, he doesn't have the opportunity to bounce off of other people because acting is reacting. He doesn't have that. So he did a very good job. I remember being at the time like he's a musician, and to see him do so well in the movie, even as a kid, I was like, man, he's great. And he's working with an animatronic shark and a pet bird. You know what I mean? That's pretty much all he's got to work with. And when you get to see him interact with Carter and especially Michael Rappaport's character, they have a nice little jokey banter together. And there's one particular moment. There's one particular moment where LL Cool J convinced me, where I was like, yes, this guy is a star. And it might be very, very silly to some people, but it's the scene where he grabs a camcorder and he starts leaving a video for his family in case he doesn't survive. And he says his piece. He goes, hey, I'm, I tried to be a loving father and a husband. And he says a couple things about himself. And he goes, but what else do I have to say? What else do I have to leave you? And he pauses. And there's this twinkle in his eye that he does so well. And he kind of chirps up and says, we will begin with the perfect omelet, which is 3 eggs and not 2. Amateurs like to use milk for density. This is a mistake.
Yeah.
And I remember the theater laughing, and I was like, that's the moment. Like, that was the moment. And because he was able to transition so smoothly from a really somber moment into an upbeat comedic bit. And I was like, that was the moment. And I absolutely love that scene. It's one of my favorite jokes in the entire movie.
So let's start winding things down with some closing thoughts here. When you look at lists of the best shark movies of all time,
oh yeah,
obviously Jaws is going to be number one. It's always going to be Jaws. And depending on the list you see, sometimes you'll see Deep Blue Sea in the top 10. Sometimes you'll see Deep Blue Sea in the top 5. And sometimes you'll see Deep Blue Sea in the top 3.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're all fine. They're all fine. But the thing that Deep Blue Sea did, see, Jaws was a thriller. It was a horror, but it was like a drama.
Mm-hmm.
And any other time another shark movie came along or some type of premise like this, sometimes they would try to capture that magic. The other Jaws movies tried to recapture that magic, but they couldn't. So what Rennie Harlan did with Deep Blue Sea, he said, you know what? I'm not even going to try to go serious. We're just going to go ridiculous.
Steroids.
I'm going to lean into my action movie background, into my cliffhanger, into my long kiss goodnight side. And we're going to give somebody, these people something memorable, but not because we tried to make it something like Jaws. And credit to him, because people are still talking about the movie to this day. And, it's in the conversation of, after Jaws, what are the memorable shark movies can you name? And people almost always say Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah. Deep Blue Sea. Listen, if I had to make a list, Jaws would be number 1. And I have no shame in my game that Deep Blue Sea is my number 2.
That's all right.
It's my favorite because, like you said, like, there have been other shark movies that have attempted to kind of pull off what Jaws did, and you just can't do it. It's very similar to, if someone were to ask me to make some sort of analogy, I would say Jaws is the Dark Knight of shark movies. You know what I mean? Like, you can say other movies are as good, but The Dark Knight is The Dark Knight. Like other movies try, but the Dark Knight is in a class of its own, and I feel like that's what Jaws is. It's in its own class, and when you try to either duplicate it or recreate it, you just can't do it. So you have to kind of go as far away from it as possible, and that's what Rennie did. Rennie just said, "Let's make a shark movie on steroids." Like he said, we're going to make them more aggressive. We're going to make them more intelligent. We're going to make the deaths more creative, more brutal. We're going to surprise you. We're going to shock you. You know what I mean? And it's just like all those aspects that he put into this movie make it so exciting for me and for many other people. So like, again, if I made a list, it would be my number 2. I have a lot of nostalgia attached to this movie. I love the fun facts about this movie. Like I'll say a little bit, not too much, but one of my favorite fun facts about the movie is that there was a completely different ending that they put in front of test audiences. And this is one thing that I like too, and it's another reason why I enjoy the movie, because I think that when a director can kind of sit back and go, maybe that didn't work. Maybe we should do this, because in the original ending, which anybody can look up, there are photos. You can look this up anywhere. In the original ending, Susan was going to live, and Susan was going to be the one that essentially takes out the main shark. And she was going to share a kiss with Carter, and there was going to be like this romance love angle at the very end. And Tess audience just didn't feel a lot of that was earned. They didn't feel it was appropriate between her and Carter in the relationship. And they also didn't want, they felt like she really never got, I guess, what her character deserved or what was coming to her, because again, many people viewed her as the villain, and she was going to be a survivor and everything else, and audiences didn't like it. And Rennie says, man, like it didn't land. Well, maybe let's do this. And they didn't even have time for reshoots, so they just manipulated what they had and they made it work. And it's another reason why I like this movie. And I'm not saying that every director should, because if you try to please everyone, you please no one. And I'm not saying that you should always change your vision, but I like the idea that he was able to sit back and go, well, this movie is meant to be a fun movie for as many people to enjoy as possible. And if people, it's not that they didn't like the ending, they just disliked that character so much. He was like, oh, I don't want them to leave with that feeling. I don't want them to leave sour. I want them to leave hype and energetic. So this is what we're going to do. And I love that he was able to do that. And it's one of the reasons why I love the movie, because of the ending. The ending gets me going. But I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I love it. I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, for anybody who knows me. So the idea of mixing sci-fi with sharks and the ability to make them somehow scarier than they already are, because listen, it's no secret, I'm terrified of sharks. They are monsters. When people say monsters don't exist, I'm like, monsters exist, just not the ones that you are thinking of, because a shark is a monster, dude. That is a beast. Its main thing is to eat and swim. That's it. But I'm very happy that I can still watch this movie today and enjoy it as much as I did in the past. I think one of the things that works for it really well is the idea that they mixed practical effects and they only use CGI when they had to. And luckily, the CGI doesn't feel that dated. It works because they don't use it as much as they had to. The practical effects look great, and they even mixed real footage of real sharks. They would capture real footage of sharks doing things and insert it into the movie for tight clips, and it worked out. And I think it helps the movie hold up. Again, this is where I got like a man crush on Tom Jane. I loved following him in other movies after this, so I got to take a lot from this movie. But I'll always have the memories of, sneaking in to go see it with my cousin at the theaters, and just the creative depths and the score and the music and LL and Sam Jackson and everything else. So for me, it's absolutely a top contender for best shark movies. It's my number 2, right behind Jaws. I make no apologies for this statement whatsoever, because I absolutely love Deep Blue Sea.
All right. Well, it's not my second favorite shark movie, and
I know what yours is.
Yes, absolutely. I've said it before, but we'll get to that eventually.
We're gonna get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, just memorable at this point. I would call it a cult classic at this point as well. It kind of paved the way for other other shark movies to continue being successful outside of that, the Jaws realm. We had a more serious approach in open water. Then we had Sharknado,
Oh yeah.
and even more ridiculous, the Meg and the Meg 2.
Yes.
So and that's okay, and then we have other serious ones like The Shallows and such. So, but it's up there for me, absolutely. Yeah, definitely top 5. I'll give it top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Alrighty, folks. That was the Panel Bros official breakdown for Deep Blue Sea. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe at the Panel Bros, we'd appreciate it. As always, if you give us those subscribes, that will help us get our reach to more listeners and to more viewers as well. If you could also let us know how you felt about Deep Blue Sea in the comments below, we'd appreciate that as well. And if you can stay tuned, we have one more shark movie for you. I'm not going to keep you waiting here. We're going to talk about The Shallows next. So
Shallows, baby.
please come back. Please come back. And oh, yeah, there's some stuff to unpack with The Shallows as well. So for Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.